The auctioneer's gavel slammed down, and the crowd fell silent. "Sold for $5, he bellowed, pointing to a frail figure huddled in the corner of the dusty stage. A ripple of murmurs spread through the grimy marketplace, but no one dared look too long. In a world where desperation turned humans into commodities, this was just another transaction. Except it wasn't. Not for Elias, a man whose heart thumped with a reckless kind of courage. He stood, clutching the crumpled $5 bill he'd scraped together from weeks of scavenging, his eyes locked on the woman he'd just bought. Her name, he'd learn later, was Lila. And this moment, this reckless, impossible moment, would change everything. Elias was no hero. At 32, he was a drifter in a crumbling border town, where hope was as scarce as clean water. He'd grown up in the shadow of the Great Collapse, a decade-long unraveling of economies and governments that left people like him scavenging for survival. His days were spent hauling scrap metal for pennies, his nights haunted by the memory of a family lost to the chaos. But Elias had something most others didn't, a stubborn flicker of kindness that refused to die, even when the world tried to snuff it out. That flicker was why he stood in the marketplace that day, not to buy, but to save the woman. Lila was barely 20, her face gone from hunger, her wrists bound with coarse rope. Her eyes, though, burned with a defiance that made Elias pause. They weren't the eyes of someone broken, they were the eyes of someone who'd survived. The auction was a grim ritual in this lawless town, where traffickers sold the desperate to the highest bidder, laborers, servants, or worse. Elias had heard the whispers of the auctions but had never dared come close until that morning, when he'd overheard a vendor mention a young woman who'd fought back, nearly escaping before being dragged to the block. Something in him snapped. He couldn't walk away. With his $5, his entire savings, he outbid a leering man in a stained coat who'd offered for. The crowd jeered as Elias handed over the money, their laughter biting at his pride. "What's a scrap rat like you gonna do with her?" one shouted. Elias ignored them, his focus on Lila as the auctioneer shoved her toward him. She stumbled, her bare feet scraping the wooden stage, and for a moment, their eyes met. Hers were wary, searching for his intentions. His were steady, silently pleading for her trust. He led her away from the marketplace, the weight of curious stares heavy on his back. They walked in silence through the town's labyrinth of crumbling buildings and makeshift stalls, the air thick with the stench of smoke and despair. Elias's shack was a mile out, a lean-to of corrugated metal and salvaged wood, but it was shelter. When they arrived, he cut the ropes from Lila's wrists with a rusty knife, wincing as the blade grazed her skin. "You're free," he said, his voice low but firm. "I ain't like them. You don't owe me nothing." Lila didn't move. She stood in the doorway, rubbing her wrists, her gaze fixed on him as if waiting for the catch. "Why?" she asked finally, her voice hoarse but sharp. "Why spend everything you have just to let me go?" Elias shrugged, scratching the back of his neck. "Didn't seem right, leaving you there. I had the money. I used it." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't press further. Instead, she sank to the floor, exhaustion overtaking her. Elias offered her a tin of beans and a cracked mug of water, the best he could manage. She ate slowly, watching him, and he wondered what horrors she'd endured to make her so guarded. Over the next few days, Lila stayed, not because she had nowhere else to go, though that was true, but because she sensed something in Elias she hadn't seen in years, decency. Their conversations were halting at first. Lila shared fragments of her story, a childhood in a village across the border, a family torn apart by raiders, and months on the run before she was captured. Elias listened, his own pain mirrored in her words. He told her about his sister, Mara, who'd vanished during the collapse, and how he'd spent years searching for her, only to find dead ends. The shared grief built a fragile bridge between them, one neither fully trusted but both needed. The town, however, wasn't kind to their arrangement. Word spread of Elias's act, and suspicion followed. The traffickers didn't take kindly to someone disrupting their trade, even if it was just one woman. A week after the auction, Elias found a note nailed to his shack's door: "Give her back, or pay." The message wasn't signed, but the threat was clear. Elias burned the note, his jaw tight, and told Lila to stay hidden. She refused. "I'm not your burden," she said, her voice fierce. "If they come, I fight." The first challenge came not from the traffickers but from within. Lila's mistrust ran deep, and Elias's quiet kindness unnerved her. One night, she accused him of wanting something from her, her words cutting like a blade. "Nobody does something for nothing," she spat. "What's your price?" Elias's face flushed with hurt, but he didn't raise his voice. "I don't got a price," he said. "I just want you to have a chance." The words hung between them, and for the first time, Lila's defenses cracked. She didn't apologize, but the next morning, she helped him repair a broken wall of the shack. Her way of making amends. The trafficker's threats escalated. One evening, as Elias returned from scavenging, he found his shack ransacked, his few possessions smashed. Lila was unharmed, but her face was pale. "They'll come for me," she said. "You should let me go." Elias shook his head. "Not letting you face them alone." Together, they devised a plan not to run, but to fight back. Lila knew the traffickers' routes from her time in captivity, and Elias had allies among the town's outcasts, people who owed him favors from years of small kindnesses. The resolution came in a tense standoff under a blood-red sunset. Elias and Lila, backed by a ragtag group of scavengers, confronted the traffickers in an abandoned warehouse on the town's edge. The leader, a wiry man named Voss, sneered at Elias. "You think you're a savior, scrap rat? She's worth more than you'll ever be." Lila stepped forward, her voice steady. "I'm worth more than you'll ever know." The fight was brutal but brief. Elias's group had the element of surprise, and Lila's knowledge of the traffickers' weaknesses turned the tide. Voss and his men fled, battered and humiliated, their operation in the town crippled. In the aftermath, Lila made a choice. She could have left, started over somewhere new, but she stayed. Not out of obligation, but because she saw in Elias what he'd seen in her, a spark worth protecting. Over months, they rebuilt the shack into something sturdier, a home. Lila taught Elias how to plant seeds she'd salvaged from her village, and he showed her how to navigate the town's dangers. They became partners, not in debt to each other, but in shared purpose. One day, Lila pressed a small, folded cloth into Elias's hand. Inside was a silver locket, etched with a flower, the only thing she'd kept from her past. "This is everything I have," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave me my life back. I'm giving you everything back." Elias tried to refuse, but she closed his fingers around it. "It's not payment," she said. "It's a promise. We're in this together." The story doesn't end with a grand triumph or a fairy tale romance, but with something realer. Two broken people who found strength in each other. Elias and Lila didn't change the world, but they changed their corner of it. They built a life from scraps, proving that freedom isn't just about breaking chains, it's about choosing to stand, to fight, to trust. And as you watch this story unfold, think about the $5 in your own life, the small, reckless acts of kindness that might just give someone everything back. Because in a world that takes, giving is the rebellion that lasts.